Hello, everybody. Joining in. Just give it a minute for people to join in before we kick off. Thanks, everyone, for being punctual.
We need some music, Alex.
I can sing. I can't
You
sing
could
well, but I can sing.
I'll just do some dancing in the background.
Going above and beyond duty.
That's it, Brock. We didn't organise this in the pre-briefing as to sing and dance beforehand.
The worst combination is someone that enjoys singing but isn't good at it, and I've got both of them. So
You're really good to take with karaoke. You're enthusiastic. Love a growth mindset. We can do anything.
Knowing this is being recorded and we've got heaps to talk about today, I might kick off with a good morning/afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. So I'm really excited to welcome everyone here for this discussion on AI and technology, so bridging the access and wellbeing gap. Just a bit of context, we're living in this remarkable moment that I'm sure everyone is across, so you wouldn't be here in this call, where AI is not just a buzzword, but it's really a transformative force that's reshaping the way that we work and live. AI is everywhere and its impact is being seen all over the place already, from automating routine tasks to enhancing our decision-making capabilities. AI is changing the landscape of our workplaces and our daily lives. What exactly is AI? At its core, AI refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think and learn like humans. This encompasses a wide range of technologies, including machine learning, natural language processing, and computer vision. And I promise that's the most technical that I'm going to get in this call. While many of us are really familiar with AI through applications like ChatGPT, its scope extends beyond just those large language models. The AI is being used to improve healthcare outcomes, drive advancements in autonomous vehicles, and enhance cybersecurity, even doing things like predicting climate change patterns. In a work context, we often hear about AI tools like Copilot that will help people become more creative, help solve problems, and save time. So as we dive into today's discussion, we will explore how AI and technology can improve employee well-being, make workplaces more accessible, and address societal implications from a more broad perspective. We will also bring some clarity into the conversation around AI, particularly its impact on people and personal time, and understand how AI is reshaping human interactions and cultural practices. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I hope you're all as equally excited as me. If you could please use the chat to contribute to the conversation today. And for any questions you have along the way, I'll make sure to call them out as we progress. So I did want to introduce our spectacular speakers that we're very lucky to have join us today. Kicking off with Brock Bastian, a distinguished professor of social psychology at the University of Melbourne and director of Psychological Safety Australia. In his consulting, Brock brings scientific insights on culture, communication, well-being, and behavioral ethics to address a range of organizational challenges. From speaking to senior leaders of large organizations to providing accessible workshops for frontline staff, Brock has a unique capacity to communicate scientific knowledge in a practical and accessible manner. I'm also delighted to introduce our next panelist, Carly Scott Murphy. As a global black belt for employee experience at Microsoft, Carly is an expert in technology and change management with a passion for inspiring businesses to think differently about behavior change and AI adoption. She brings extensive experience in employee experience technology, change management and transformation. As well as her day job, I've had the great joy of getting to know Carly as a leader within Microsoft Australia and New Zealand in mental health. Carly began and continues to lead the Real Mates Peer Supporter program, as well as advocating loudly for a focus on good mental health practices by all. Personally, I'm very excited because Carly is fantastic and such a hero of mine at Microsoft. I'm also really hyped to introduce to you Hannah Clements. Hannah is an organizational change management consultant at Avanade With a practical, people-centered approach, she combines her insights into human-focused business processes with data analysis to guide teams through change and drive meaningful results. Hannah is also a champion of mental health and is a member of Thriving from the Start, which is the Corporate Mental Health Alliance Early in Career Committee and Network. So that was the formal introduction. Everyone knows who you are, what you do. But I'd like to throw to the three of you, what did I miss and how are you using AI in your day-to-day? Might throw to Brock first.
Yeah, thank you for that. What did you miss? Well, I suppose I do quite a few things in addition to that, like cycling, managing 3 children, camping on the weekends, and a range of other things. But yeah, I suppose I'm just still exploring. I think, as we all are, the different use cases for AI, and they just keep popping up, and you kind of keep recognizing the various ways that you can apply that to different aspects of work function. I think it's sort of an interesting journey. Sometimes it works well, and then you realize other areas it's not working so well. But then you find those sweet spots. So still exploring. I'm curious, and yeah, very interested in finding those different use cases.
Carly?
Yeah, look, I'm still blushing from that introduction. So Alex, thank you so much. So yeah, Global Black Belt is my formal title internally. What you did miss, I'm also a second dan Taekwondo and a Taekwondo instructor. So I'm training for my third dan. So I kind of use that to force myself to get a bit of balance. I'm also a mother of 2 boys, one who just finished his final physics exam yesterday and who's probably no doubt upstairs just spending his time sleeping in and just doing nothing for the next 6 months or so until uni starts. Look, I am very passionate about advocating about the mental health conversation and normalising that at work. So any chance that I do have today, I'm hopefully on my ball, and the energy that you bring is amazing because I need that today. I'm at a little bit of a low, so I really do like to always have that honest conversation. I think from an AI perspective, look, I love, well, I'm a part of the team that kind of look to have that conversation, shape that conversation. I do have a background in HR and HR tech, so I have a conversation often with people teams about AI and how do we look at it as people teams and how we need to change our organisation. So I'm really passionate about that space and how to think about change. But for me personally, if I think about the change component, for me, AI has been a really big help in kind of my everyday, but I still fight. I'm still fighting that behavior change and that need to kind of, get out there and do something, fight that difference between I don't have time to learn to I need to learn. So that's something that I'm still working on in my growth mindset around that. So yeah, thanks.
Hannah?
Hi, everyone. Expecting it's my turn. Thank you so much for having me on the call. A little bit more about me. I suppose I am someone who loves the outdoors and exercise and enjoying sunshine. And when it comes to AI, I think, being a consultant, I'm on the ground working in an IT firm. So, really using AI day to day in my work tasks. But I also find that I use it, socially as well and tracking my health and fitness. I'm going to Japan soon, so using it to build a Japan itinerary for me. So yeah, just really utilizing it in a way that works for me. And, yes, I am a part of the Thriving from the Start Association and a big advocate for mental health and, connecting with colleagues and really understanding that AI can feel overwhelming, but finding ways in which it works for everyone and utilizing the benefits of it.
Thanks, Hannah. And you just touched on how you're using AI for health and fitness. So keeping with that theme, I know that a lot of the discussion around AI is usually around the time that we can save. That kind of makes sense from a ROI perspective. The people leading the conversation are also selling it. They want to show that it's going to save people time and make people more productive. But let's just pull out of the time savings for a moment. What are the other pieces of value that people are getting from AI?
So I think, beyond the obvious time savings, which are, undeniably valuable. I do believe probably one of the greatest benefits AI brings is to our overall well-being. And it kind of got me thinking, it's like having an expert in your handbag or your pocket to have 24/7. And in the workplace, I think our mental well-being can feel exacerbated when we feel out of our depth. And so there are many times when there are, gaps in skills, within my knowledge, which I have to overcome quite quickly. And rather than let that anxiety take control, I can ask those silly questions and consult with AI without fear or judgment and explore those ideas with ease. And I feel like I'm able to access AI when maybe my manager isn't available, which allows me to kind of maintain that momentum and not feel stuck. And I suppose I look at AI like a colleague, a friend, an expert, a manager, maybe a research book. So amongst all the benefits that we all know, like time savings and process simplifications, AI as an anxiety reducer and an instant response is probably one of the best wellbeing benefits, especially, if we approach AI and the changes with it with an optimistic mindset.
Yeah, I love that idea of it being a help, and that whole instantaneous response. And maybe this, Brock, might be something you to talk to about a bit of psychology. We have, we do a lot, and we expect kind of that instantaneous response. We've been trained to kind of do that, and I think that's where a lot of that overwhelm comes from in terms of from a well-being, because it feels like, particularly in the last 5 years, it's kind of go in terms of just those snippets of news, or that the dopamine hits we get from things. So I suppose in a way, having that, I call Copilot my executive assistant. I don't have an EA here at Microsoft. It's book your own flights and create your own itineraries and set up your own meetings. But yeah, so for me, I think that instant response is great, Hannah, to that point, because for me, I do like, I'm working on 5 things at once, and if I ask a question and say, hey, Brock, I need an answer to this, and maybe you're overseas and I've got to wait overnight and things like that. So, I mean, one of the things that I really love, we have in our enterprise social network internally, we have the capability to ask questions, and AI helps me find an answer. Somebody else might have answered that question already. And I love that part of, I start asking my question in a question format, and it goes, oh, well, this question might have been asked 3 times before, and here's an expert who's answered it. And so I like that kind of idea that I can keep going with what I'm doing, and kind of get things done. And for me, working, being that type of person that works on multiple things at once, I love the fact that I can go, right, done, and not have to kind of think, oh my God, I forgot to follow that up because I'm waiting for Brock to respond to something. So Brock, I don't know if AI is like encouraging this dopamine hit behavior or not, or what do you see in that?
Yeah, it was interesting. I quite resonate with the idea that it's a great way to manage. It's sort of that often we want to bounce ideas off people to get that reassurance. We want to check in on our thinking. That sort of social element of that is really important. I do think we don't want to remove that social element. I think that's a really important way in which we connect with colleagues and build culture and whatnot. But certainly one of the use cases that I'm seeing is that, that sort of sounding board, things to bounce ideas off, what do you think about this? What's that? And again, that user interface where it's just so easy to, as you said, to put a question in and get a response. And, we can sort of, again, it's a fairly well-informed response, probably more information than most of our friends can carry in their own minds. So it's a great way just to bounce these ideas around and we want to take those back probably into our teams or with our leaders and otherwise, but in those moments and I guess that access to knowledge, or the access to just asking that question and getting that response, whether it's a dopamine hit, I think it probably can be, but I think it's also beyond that, just a really useful input into having that at our fingertips. And I like the way Hannah said it sort of reduces anxiety, and I can see a range of cases in which it would actually be doing that, and just providing that reassurance. Yes, maybe that line of thinking's online, or yes, this seems like a good idea, or that's heading in the right direction. Planning a trip to Japan, you've just given me a whole new. I sit down and I think about. I've thought about a trip to Japan. I get lost every time, so I'm not that.
Brock, it's fabulous. Like that was one of, actually, as we talking about change and adoption here at Microsoft, one of the first things in our competitions, right, to get people to use and explore, right, do it something that's personally connected, right? So getting something to do something that's really connected to you personally was really important. And they said, okay, you need to create a 5-day itinerary to your favorite place and like input the details, like I'm traveling with family, or I'm traveling for a romantic thing, or I'm really interested in, for me it was the ancient Egypt and I want to see these places. And it was great. It said hotels. And so Hannah, I'd love to know what you're going to in Japan later on, maybe later.
I'll share it with you.
I also love the visual of an AI expert in your handbag, Hannah, because it really is just omnipresent. Like it's always there, and we can always kind of just pull that out and use it for whatever it is that we need to get done in that moment. Carly, you spend a lot of your days speaking to customers of AI, people who are using it. What is your sense on the sentiment around AI? What do we know about how different types of workers are receiving AI and leveraging it?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, well, firstly, I might start with a little bit of statistics, and I'm hopefully getting this right. It's either 75 or 78%. But in our work trend index report that Microsoft produce every year, we did a bit of research in terms of how people are using AI, and it's either 75 or 78% of people are actually bringing their own AI to work, right? So we're seeing that sentiment in amongst survey respondents, right? There is that. If you're not providing it for me, I'm going to bring it there. People are really interested in this space, and how could you not be interested in it, right? It's been the biggest talking point, the biggest kind of conversation that's been out there, and it's not a once in a generation. This is a change that's happening so quickly, right? And if you think about how quickly it's really been happening, if you compare how long it took to get to 100 million users of the mobile phone, 16 years, with the 3 months that ChatGPT came in, that it took to get to 100 million users, it really shows how quickly and how fast it is. And that kind of creates kind of these two camps, so to speak. One is I see a lot of people who are really curious about it, really want to explore. They're the ones who are really keen. They're bringing their own AI because they're like, all right, well, I know I can do this and it's going to help me out and do that. So they're really curious about it. And on the flip side, there are those who are, a bit afraid. That maybe they've heard, that maybe the echo chambers they're in, whichever, they're hearing some bad things about, AI is going to take your job or things like that. And maybe they don't have, I'm privileged to work at Microsoft because one of the reasons why is because we have that growth mindset that we can go out and explore. But I think, it's really, there is that gamut, but I think, and people see it for different reasons, right? We talk about reducing that workload, becoming, organizations like we want to become more productive. But I think from an individual perspective, a lot of people are like, I really need it because I just want to have a break. I just want to I just need to reduce some of that workload. So I think a lot more people I hear on the ground are doing it because of that. But then, you think about frontline workers, you think about, call centers, there is that fear as well around that. So, as organizations, we need to think about the anxiety that's causing, not just, in our information worker and kind of knowledge worker area where, we're potentially reducing some of that anxiety. But we need to think about as organizations how we think about that change management process around AI, and also as organizations, yes, there's an element of cost optimization there, but you don't want to be known as an organization out there who's getting rid of half the organization because of AI. You really need to be thinking about how do you have also a social responsibility to to our people out there, not employees, but to people out there, to think, how can I help support retraining, repurposing, reskilling people across the organization and reduce some of that anxiety as well.
It's interesting to take I think from a psychological perspective, thinking about that change, because with change comes uncertainty. And with uncertainty comes what we call loss aversion, where people become much more focused on what they potentially could lose versus what they potentially could gain. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of here is, that uncertainty, that fear of the unknown. We are very worried about, well, what's this going to take away from me? And I think in an organizational context, I mean, again, keeping focused in that kind of use case, in an organizational context, we need to manage that change in a way that perhaps also takes that psychology into account, so that we do. It's very hard to see what I'm going to get from something new because it hasn't happened yet, but it's sometimes very easy to see what I'm going to lose, because that's far more concrete. And again, under uncertainty, that's exactly where our human minds tend to go. So we do need to probably factor that into the way that we're introducing it and thinking about that human side of it.
I think, I was with a global HR team yesterday, actually having this conversation, and I think it's a real responsibility to think about how we really think about the organization. How do we think about the change? And this is not just a tech change. I think that's sort of that first 6 months in terms of over the last 12 months, the first half of that was really about, oh, this is new and shiny toy, and let's go and play and throw it over the fence and people will use it. Yeah, people kind of use it a little bit, but this is a change that's happening super quickly, and that's increasing that anxiety. And I think we also need to think about from a people perspective is, we don't have time to consider the risks as we have done in the past, right? Or take the time to make the change. So, for example, understanding skills in an organization, maybe there was 3 years we'd create the job framework, but now we need to be thinking about skills and what skills in an organization so that we can support people who might be more impacted. We don't have that time, and I think that's also increasing some of that anxiety. So, and I think that ambiguity as well, where we've changed from being able to see long term to oh my gosh, now I've got to deal with, from a leadership perspective, thinking about leading through ambiguity is what we talk about at Microsoft, because that vision of that 5 years kind of has really reduced to something a little bit more foggy, and so that's causing a little bit of that sentiment to bubble up too. How do I lead in this era? How do I be a leader and lead when I don't know what's coming? And so being comfortable in that ambiguity is a skill set that we need to think about really putting in our leaders and to some extent our people as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking aloud as you say that as well. I wonder how it lands differently between earlier in career people like myself, who I don't have habits that I built up over decades. I built them up over a couple of years, and it's been a funny few years as well, because I built up virtual habits before I did in-person ones. So now using AI tools isn't the biggest shock to the system, because it's just things keep changing. I wondered, or Carl, you might have a view on this. Would that impact people differently if it's later in a career?
Yeah, I think so, right? Because I look at you and talk, in our conversations, right? You came into this workforce as a sort of digital native, right? I was about to say digital nomad, but you've come into here as a digital native, right? You have grown up with this technology, you've grown up with this pace of change, so to speak. And, you know, for me, I think, you know, I've got those formed habits. So I think, you know, there is a lot for us to consider as organizations as we move into, as we navigate through this world, right? That there are different personas that we need to look at. And that's not just you're a marketing persona or your sales persona. This is, you're an early in career, or you're neurodiverse, or you're more mature in your career. I think actually in the earlier research that we did right at the very beginning, there was actually research that showed, just trying to think of it, that people who were later in their career had a better experience with prompting and were picking it up easier because they were used to that delegation, right? I'm used to delegating, hey, Alex, can you do this? And I want it in this format and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, that language came naturally to me. But I think, you know, going over this last year, I mean, somewhat that will still be a little bit relevant there, but I think the speed and agility early careers will be agile, be more, you know, deal. Well, actually, no, let me just say be more agile rather than deal with the ambiguity, because I think that's different. Where we be careful in thinking about, you know, how we support our organizations and our people is to think about those personas and to think, how do I find on how these particular personas that are not based on role type are actually dealing with this change.
And Hannah, does that align to, because we're part of the Thriving from the Start committee together, does that align to the sentiment you seem to see from your early in career peers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you were saying, Alexander, about the fact that we have come into this kind of digital world, you know, joining Avanade 3 years ago for myself, I joined Avanade when it was going through the COVID time. So I actually started when everyone was online. And completely right to you when you said, you know, we learned how to operate in the digital aspect before sometimes even getting that face-to-face interaction. And so kind of adapting to the advancements of AI has felt, you know, there's constant change. And I think we're actually a bit more adaptable to it. We're more open and perceptive to it. And I think, you know, yeah, we're able to kind of recognize, oh, this is what works for us. And, you know, this is a little bit too out of scope at the moment, but having the kind of training and the resources available to learn on that obviously is very beneficial. So yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Anna. I just wanted to come back to Brock. Earlier, you made reference to the social element of people bouncing things off each other as being important and something that, yeah, is important in whatever kind of world. From your view, like from a behavioral and social psychology lens, how do you see the AI tech reshaping human interaction in the workplace?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think it's one we're probably just still exploring, right? You know, it hasn't fully hit the ground or hasn't fully reshaped organisations in the way that it probably will. I think certainly to start with, you know, organisations do need to be, and we do need to be aware that just this sort of level of change we're talking about, and particularly in terms of mental health and organisations' responsibility to support people's mental health, significant change does represent and is listed as a psychosocial hazard or risk for people and their mental health. And so we do need to think about AI in that context. You know, is this being managed appropriately? Is it change? Are people being supported? And as always, I think, you know, it does come back to that leadership, as Carly was talking about, the culture. You know, how are these things supporting the way in which this is being introduced? But certainly, I mean, it's interesting, you know, just I suppose there is that productivity or efficiency gain that comes with it. And I think as that happens, how does that change people's roles and their jobs? What does my work look like when I maybe effectively move it into a more strategic, I suppose, approach to the way that I work? Because again, I'm using those prompts, or I'm using AI perhaps to push some of the other aspects of my role along. make it more efficient. So certainly that element of it. I think the more that we're able to use it, in some ways, obviously the virtual world over COVID and beyond has led to a lot more flexibility and I suppose asynchronous communication approaches, which has led to more flexibility in the workplace and how we work. So I think that's going to continue, and the various ways in which AI might play into that and assist with that is certainly going to be very interesting. But I think also, what's going to be interesting is how this all plays out in terms of perhaps how organisations then utilise that additional gain and see it and place it in terms of their people and their people's wellbeing and mental health, and think about that very carefully. So we've just been hearing about the Medibank's 4-day work week experiment, which they put a number of their teams through, and there's been some interesting a lot of positive benefits from that. There's also been some lessons learnt. But one of the things that they've certainly, I think, been encouraging their teams to do in order to be able to achieve that is to find those aspects of their work or their ways of working, the various tasks they're engaged with. What are the things I can strip back on? What are unnecessary aspects of my role? How can I create a little bit more efficiency and productivity so that I can actually, achieve that 4-day work week and get that extra day off? So it's around job design. It's around thinking strategically around how I do my work. So that I'm able to, still manage the workload, but actually also do it in a more efficient way and get a 3-day weekend. I think AI is going to feed into that, a lot. And if organisations leave that space for people, there's some interesting gains there in terms of productivity, retention, satisfaction in the workplace, even being an employer of choice. Sorry, Carly.
Oh no, I was just going to add to that in terms of some of the conversations I've had with teams. I mentioned it before, is this whole idea of can we just pause and can we just use AI to help us first and reduce some of that burnout before we add, I'm going to work on more productive work, right? Because I think that's what a lot of organizations are really focusing on, is this whole idea of you're going to take away value work, we're going to put high value work there, and then there's anxiety around that in terms of, but I have that burnout that I'm dealing with and I just need that space, but then I'll do it eventually. But we need to be considering that pressure from a mental health perspective on people. I'm not saying that we can't get people to work on that high work, because that's also engaging, right? That can be really engaging and want to do rather than kind of that low value work. But the other side of things we need to think about is coming back to that whole idea of actually one of our CVPs came over and was talking in kind of their HR teams, an example, and I'm really paraphrasing here, this was not necessarily the correct example, but for HR teams we used AI to do level 1 kind of help desk to kind of do some of those more high value activities, let's just say coaching, for example. In their current job, right, 80% of their time might be on tickets, and then 5% might be on coaching, and the rest of the maths that I can't do right now would be on other stuff. But what we're saying then suddenly is, like, with AI, it's you're going to be like doing 10% because now you're moving up to level 2 or just looking at some of those. But now I want you to do 50% of your job for coaching. And so that's where we need to come back to, if we want people to do that high value work as well, don't just assume that they're going to do it. We need to make sure that they're prepared for that and psychologically prepared for that too. But I think that just coming back to that whole, I feel like that some days is like, I just need AI to give me some time back, because I think also, we talk about that flexible work as well. We've got to look at boundaries and how we help our employees put boundaries around them so that they're not working late into the night because they can, or my boss pinged me at like 10 o'clock at night and doing things like that. So a whole range of other stuff there.
A lot of that comes down to just good change management, creating space for people to, to adopt and to learn the new technology, and then also to, I suppose, to retrain and find, the additional aspects to their role. So a bit of that space, as you mentioned, is really important.
it just comes back to, I think, Carly, we've had this chat before with, if AI is saving me time, then if I fill up that time with other meetings, then that's not really good for me. But if the change is being landed well, and we understand that, well, now I've got an extra 30 minutes, I can use that 30 minutes to go just brainstorm or just do something creative or more exciting, more interesting to me.
Well, on
that's
that
better for
point,
me.
yeah, on that point, I always talk to people and they're like, oh, AI can help with meetings and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, let's just take a step back first and look at, why do we have so many meetings? Do we need so many meetings before we put AI to help us with those meetings? And that's just an example of anything, right? Don't look at the underlying problem. Don't just kind of put a band-aid solution over the top. And that's something to think about in terms of, that mental load that's on people, and probably why there's that sentiment of like, oh my God, I just need to use AI to help me, pull back to a reasonable position before I do anything extra on top of it.
Hannah, got a question for you. There's just a lot on AI right now. I don't think you can open the paper, or I mean, if people still open newspapers anymore, like be in sync with the news without seeing AI and headlines on AI. And often we see things like AI is going to replace our jobs, and sometimes I hear that as a sentiment, because it's this is sci-fi thing that's probably happened a lot longer than what we've been talking about AI. What can people do to help navigate the change in their environment and the implications of AI for them?
I kind of related to what Brock said, I mean, with change management, where, we often see change as either having a price or a prize. And so if we see AI as a price, then we perceive the change as a tax, or, a reduction of what we're comfortable in doing, and we can become negative and pessimistic about it. But if we see it as a prize, giving us an opportunity to enrich our job and lives and gifting us the time to grow and learn through efficiency and knowledge acquisition, then we can be more positive and optimistic about the change and lean into the AI eagerly. But, is it valid for people to feel uneasy about this? Absolutely. But we can choose to have a sense of control. And so, I mentioned this the other day, but when I've been thinking about this and thinking about when I was learning how to drive a car, and my dad said, don't let the car control you, you control the car. And I think that really relates to AI, because first, we need to learn how to operate it, and we need to learn how to gain the knowledge and the tools to work alongside it, and understand how AI can benefit our processes and our day-to-day tasks. And it can feel really daunting, especially at which the pace AI evolves. But for example, if I hadn't have chosen to learn how to drive, then, all the other people that had learned would have reached their destination faster, whilst I would still be walking. And so I think, the only thing that doesn't change is the amount of change. So if we, dig in and try to defend the status quo, then we can often get left behind. But AI is a, technology revolution, and that is, rapidly changing, and that really requires agility and a positive change response within individuals, and, making the unknown known. Through learning and communication, through businesses having a clear business strategy, and really making it evident to people so you can reduce that risk and that fear. But at the end of the day, my mindset is AI is here to support and amplify your impact, and it's your choice to let it work in tandem with you and drive you forward.
I think I'd just add to that. I kind of feel like I'd argue that point of the thing that doesn't change is the amount of change. It feels like it's different, and I think that's probably because that change is like compacted into one point. But I definitely get you there. I think I often say, like, it's not AI who will take your job, it's somebody who knows how to use AI, right? Like you're talking about somebody who drives a car will get there faster, right? So exactly that same sentiment. And so yeah, that's why it's important, you know, from our leaders' perspective, right? Anybody who knows about change management knows that though that middle layer of leaders are going to be or managers are really going to be critical in supporting that change. And so we need to also think about how do we support that layer of managers who's really, you know, between sort of the leaders and sort of that front line or you know, the individual contributors out there. We really need to be supporting them and figuring out how do we help them deal with this ambiguity and change. I just look at internally in my own team, and I'm, as I mentioned before, I'm very close to kind of the teams that have been working on sort of a lot of AI technology, and just the amount of ambiguity that's thrown at our team and how we, you know, how we help and have conversations with customers. You know, I think about my manager needing to support us and you know, making sure, you know, we're not disheartened when something changes, right? Because we're in a space as well that it's not a kind of mature product that's out there, right? You know, how do you use Outlook and, you know, the changes that are coming in email or something, just generally, like you wouldn't even really think about it as a user, but the changes that are happening, oh, you know, this now does this, or actually we've pivoted because we're kind of found this wrong, right? There's even more change there. So supporting those managers so that they have the context, the support, their mental health as well, supporting them with, you know, people who are anxious, who are, you know, coming to them with questions or fears, right? You need to have them both being positive about AI in the organization, but also that they have the toolkit that they can support and have those conversations with people, because those conversations are not something like, oh, you know, hey, you know, let's go have a coffee and we'll solve your problems. This is an ongoing kind of fear that we need to, over time, we need to look. So making sure we empower our managers with those tools to help support through that mental health challenges and those conversations, that fear around AI and all of those is really important, that anxiety.
Yeah, and just thinking about that, maybe the more that we do that, I mean, it does occur to me that you know, in a sense, the creativity that can be brought to the uses of AI, it's a non-specific tool in so many ways, right? It's not that it's been, you know, built for this thing.
Totally.
Well, you know, I can actually engage with it and do something I didn't know I could do, and of course, this creativity innovation isn't going to come from outside organisations always. It will to some degree. It's not going to come from the top of the organisation. It's going to come from people in their roles thinking, oh, hang on a second, I could do this with that. And of course, those use cases are going to be differentiated and are going to be very nuanced depending on, you know, who's doing what and where. And so again, managing that anxiety around it, supporting people well in their adoption of it, creating that curiosity rather than fear.
How do we amplify those use cases and those experiences?
Yeah,
right?
and getting people to I suppose just to experiment with some of those applications is going to be where a lot of the value is actually gained. Yeah.
Exactly, like the Japan trip, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Carly, do you want to call back to something that you shared recently or in a call before this one? You had a conversation with someone around purpose. Did you want to share a bit around that?
Yeah, look, this is a really interesting conversation, actually. I was having a chat with a CTO of an organization from a consulting perspective, and he brought up this question around purpose. And it was really interesting, actually. I think this is, you know, purpose drives a lot of that. You know, I find that meaning and motivation in my work, right? And if we don't have purpose, we feel lost. We don't feel like we've got to give. We're demotivated, etc. And so his conversation is, right, we need to be thinking about, as AI does more and more for us, how does our purpose change and how does our meaningful work change? And I thought that was really interesting and something that we need to consider, because that very much connects into that wellness and that mental health, particularly at work, but I think this is equally as applicable in our personal lives as well. And you know, the example that they gave was, you know, I can point to a bridge and go, that was me. I did that, right? I was a part of that. You know, there was a lot of me, that a lot of my creativity, or a lot of me that goes in there. And we had the conversation, if AI can build and optimize the design of a bridge, is it like, well, I wrote the prompt that did that? It just doesn't have that same kind of meaningful kind of connection and motivation to that. So I think that's something we need to, it's new in my head. I'm still kind of having that, you know, talking to people and finding out about ideas, but I think it is really an important piece that we need to think about as we change roles, as we change what we do, you know, to find that new purpose. I don't doubt that we can't, because we have done, you know, we've done it before. You know, when the Industrial Revolution happened, it's just, this thing is happening not over generations. This is happening really quickly, and so it's kind of a little bit of it is uncharted kind of territory for us in that short space of time.
Just to add to that, we've been doing some research looking at how people, you know, perhaps deal with errors and mistakes when you're working alongside, you know, AI. And it's interesting. We actually found the opposite of what we thought. We thought that people would want to blame the AI more for a mistake or an error that occurred. And in fact, turns out that people want to take that responsibility and hold on to it, even when it's detrimental to their own image or reputation. Because again, I think and it is a barrier we need to deal with, because these are the sorts of, I suppose, human qualities that haven't been perhaps in the Industrial Revolution challenged in the same way that they are being challenged with AI. And that's, you know, I think that's just again about bringing people along and helping us to work out how to manage that. But there is some barriers there, and I think we do need to really think about how that is challenging people, their sense of their own role, their sense of their own self in that role, and what elements AI is sort of suddenly taking over, and perhaps some resistance to that. And that's very human to, I think, to have that resistance, but how we manage it and how we sort of acknowledge that is going to be important.
There'll be new roles and stuff that come out there, right? New roles formed, which then creates a very different purpose. I think it also comes from that fear of that unknown, right? Because we're not used to that. You know, we're used to, you know, 30 years of building a bridge, and now we've got to change. But, you know, for the likes of Hannah and Alex, for example, it's like, well, yeah, that's my bridge, right? And I had a part of that, because they've, you know, you've not known the graduates have not known any different, right?
I guess sticking to this theme, we've spoken about what individuals can do. We've spoken about what managers can do. But from an organizational level, a question for you, Brock: what can organizations do, or leaders do, to introduce AI into the workplace so that they're considering the ethical, human, and social inclusion aspects of what AI might mean for their workplace?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. And I think, as always, you know, there's the idea that we need to support people. Leaders need to, you know, to be supportive in the way that these changes are managed, or in the way that people are being asked to engage with new technology, building that effective culture within our organisations as well. I think we're going to see these changes adopted much more efficiently, effectively, and innovatively in organisations that have that in place, versus perhaps where that's being foisted in, where people aren't prepared for it, aren't being supported effectively around it. I think probably in that case, you know, and given the level of innovation that's possible there, some of that sort of co-design, you know, how are we going to use this, and bringing people along for that journey in terms of identifying those use cases and having some input into how it's being applied, I think is going to be really, really important. I think certainly balancing those fears over, you know, job insecurity, which we've all mentioned, and helping people to understand, what does this mean? How does this impact? What are those changes going to represent for them around those aspects of their work? I think one of the ethical considerations is interesting, is the possibility for increased surveillance. And it's actually interesting that just this week, Comcare released a new code of practice listing surveillance, unnecessary surveillance or excessive surveillance, as a psychosocial risk that they've recognised as very important for people's mental health. So, you know, and I think the question we've probably got to ask ourselves, if we're starting to use it for that purpose, is, are we shaking the wrong end of the stick here? Because if we've got to use it for surveillance, maybe those other really critical factors aren't in there, and we need to look at those upstream
Totally.
factors. Yeah. So
Are we
you know,
engaged in our work? Things like that, right?
yeah,
And you
why do I
gotta-
feel the need to sort of, to put that surveillance in place? So as with any, yeah, so I think that's going to be an interesting one, and it certainly offers those opportunities. But I think leaders and organisations really have to ask that question: why are we doing this, and is this actually going to be a good thing? And I think with the new code, it's going to be even more of an interesting question there too. But certainly that, I suppose how do we redefine, as Carly was saying, how do we redefine that sense of purpose and agency and what we do and how we relate to our roles as we adopt and implement these new technologies and as those contribute to the way we do our work? I think that's going to be a really important part of this, psychologically speaking, for people. So yeah, I think there's there is certainly going to be some resistance. I think that we have to sort of recognise that, we have to understand it, we have to address it. I think, in a sort of, in a way which recognises but also gives some space for people to be able to make those changes and adopt those new approaches. So yeah, I would say it's a range of things in there, perhaps.
Mm.
Yeah, what I'm understanding is that it's important, and like the leaders need to really be on top of it and come to the table and understand the implications in their organizations.
Yeah, and have those conversations with people around, again, I think often we don't always talk about those fears or what sits beneath, or how do people feel about this, or how does this, what are people's concerns here? We just say, look, here's how we want you to do your work now. And so I think the more that we actually are able to do that, the more that leaders do that, that's a supportive leadership part to this, that's the culture building part to this, the more successful that adoption will be.
Thanks, bro. I did want to make sure we cover this because this is the area that excites me most in the conversation around AI. What are the scenarios where people can benefit from it? So maybe we'll start with you, Carly. But what groups of people do you imagine or do you see getting I was going to say the most use, but let's just say like a lot of benefits from using AI?
Yeah, so I'll keep it short, just conscious of, want questions and stuff at the end. But yeah, I think, look, I think Hannah might be better to talk to the early in careers, but I think equally as so new starters, right? Access to information, access to finding people within the organization. I remember when I started at Microsoft 7 years ago, and still today, right? Networks within a 220,000 person organization are super important. So connecting to those people who know stuff and being able to find that stuff that they know and then connect to experts, I think that's super important. As I mentioned, I think just generally speaking, a general sentiment out there is just this idea of like, you're just asking me to do more and more and more and more, and I'm at a breaking point now. And so that idea of helping me with doing some, like taking some of that load off. For example, I had to respond to an RFP recently, and I loved Copilot helped me out because it just reduced a lot of that kind of going to find information and doing that. I think language, I think that's going to be great with a diverse language organization like we have at Microsoft, being on roles with people who are speaking different languages and using AI to connect and not having to use my brain to translate between different languages, etc., and having that, creating more inclusivity. And I think going back to some of that anxiety in terms of participation and participating in a meeting, like I can do a recap if I've suddenly had a moment where I've not followed the conversation. I can go back and reuse that, or even things like being afraid to ask those silly questions and gaining that confidence. I think those types of things are really important as well.
And did you have some scenarios to add?
Yeah, well, totally what Carly said. I think, early in career people, it's the simple stuff, it's drafting up emails and understanding how to actually connect with people in an organization, especially when you're new to it. When you are new in a role, you might suffer from a bit of imposter syndrome. And so just having, as we said, that kind of teacher in your pocket, that person that's got your back to ask those kind of questions, offer you some guidance and some support, some suggestions that you might feel, a little bit intimidated to ask your manager. But yeah, no, I think it's incredibly helpful for early in career people. I think as well, though, it's funny because it is so beneficial for us, and we get a lot of guidance from it as well. But even kind of touching before what we spoke on before, Alex, about how we did enter in a world completely digital, and we are quite adaptable to this change. Really also understanding and recognizing the power of human connection as well. So yes, we can use AI to say, how do I, start a conversation with my manager, but also, kind of working side by side with AI and adopting, like, how can we actually continue to build relationships face to face as well, whilst also, doing our work digitally.
Very true. We don't want to lose that human connection and that connecting and building that social capital so that you can have that use later. It's like that's my biggest fear, is that we rely on AI to do too much and we lose that, as you said earlier, Brock.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brock.
I was just going to say, I actually, reflecting on what Carly said before about how it's sometimes senior managers who have learned how to direct AI. I think for someone who never learned how to code, this is a great new thing, because actually older in career people can also engage with it quite easily without having to know how to engage with particular kinds of technology, without coding, basically, which is, I think, the reason I'm able to use it. The interface is very easy. Yeah.
I feel a bit of pain in being in that older career space, Brock, with these two early in career people. Am I really that old now? Oh.
But then the flip of that, and Hannah, you touched on this as well, is it just makes like other skills so much more accessible. Like when I started in a corporate world, I didn't know how to sign up on emails, and I didn't have AI to tell me. So I would go like message my brother on the side, because I wasn't going to ask someone at work. Like, am I sending regards? Am I sending like all the best? Am I like sending love? Like, I don't know what to do. But now
I look forward to that one, Alex. Love Alex.
Not that one. But now I can go to the AI in my handbag and just ask the question, and I don't have any fear doing that. I can just get it to write it for me, and that puts me at such ease, knowing that, oh, if AI said that it's regards, like that looks right, and I feel comfortable writing that, so that will make me not stress over an email after I hit send, because I don't know how it's going to be received.
Alex, we've got a question in the chat. Maybe we can answer that one quickly before we wrap up.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So the question's, how can we effectively track and measure the impact of AI and well-being? So as a starting point, what are the key metrics that should be prioritized? Carly, I might throw to you for that.
Yeah, look, I think overall, I think there's a lot of work and a lot of research and a lot of thinking being done to this. So I'm hoping, Peter, that you're not expecting the full solution here, because I think let me clarify, we're still working on that. Look, I think I think there's, in terms of key metrics, I think we need to be thinking about this from our employee survey perspectives. That's one sense that we can get from that, in terms of looking at metrics in terms of how people are feeling in this particular space. And I think Brock, you might talk a bit more to sort of psychosocial kind of metrics around there. I think I'll just talk more about some of the other tools that I've seen. Thinking about sentiment as well, I think it's a broad thing. It's not just what key metrics. I think it's a combination of things that we need to pull together to potentially create a new kind of thinking about it. Thinking about sentiment, so things like on social networks, for example, so Viva Engage, for example, that we use, looking at AI to look at the themes and sentiment of conversations that specifically might be around this particular topic, around AI or ambiguity, or words like burnout, for example, is looking at that. So there's some stuff that you can look at from those metrics. I think that's important. Brock, from a psychosocial, I know there's a lot of reporting around that. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think from that perspective, probably it's not, we don't need to be doing anything entirely different. I think we still need to be looking at those workplace factors that we know represent the risks for people's mental health. But then I suppose as we dig underneath that, as we perhaps, speak to people as we should be in our organisations to identify, what's under the bonnet there, what's creating some of those risks or impacts, for example, around perhaps uncertainty or change. That's where we start to track it back into perhaps how AI might be utilised or how it's being engaged or introduced. So, I think ultimately we've just got to keep talking to our people. I think the assessment part is always high level. It'll point us to perhaps where the hotspots are, but then we need to go and actually consult people, talk to them, ask direct questions.
I was just thinking back to when we were talking about leaders and the managers being important. I think one of those metrics that might be quite critical in this space is like how much time are your managers spending one-on-one dedicated with people, right? I think that's critical because it shows that if you spend time one-on-one with your manager, you can become, more, you have that understanding of what's happening in my life, in my work life, what's happening, what support I need, and the manager can then send that up. So if you've got that happening really well in an organization, then the understanding is you should have, you should have a good understanding of what's happening in your team and your people, and you can feed that back up.
Yeah.
But, I could probably talk longer, but we'll wrap it up.
I think this whole conversation is enormous, and I think we've covered some fantastic ground. I've learned a lot, so I just want to do a huge thank you to Brock, Carly, and Hannah for joining us today and sharing your perspectives, your insights, and knowledge. I'm sure everyone else shares the sentiment with me that it was a really powerful and educational call. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining. I'm just gonna do, just to close off, a very, very rapid fire. I want Brock, Carly, Hannah, what's one thing people can do to use AI, maximize their everything?
Maybe Hannah's.
Brock?
Ask it. Ask for something it could do for you. Ask for something new it might be able to help you with.
Hannah?
Stay up to date, keep educating yourself, and absolutely make it relevant to your world, spark interest so that it's maximizing, your interest in your lifestyle.
And Carly?
Prioritize learning, make space to take the time to use it, to learn about it, to do it, because if we don't, we'll fall behind.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks again, Brock, Carly, Hannah, and Hannah and Kim in the background, and Tracy and Jenny and everyone that helped pull this call together. Thanks, everyone. Chat soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.